Welcome to the Bag Makers Society podcast, your ultimate destination for all things bag making. If you're passionate about crafting beautiful and functional bags, whether you're a beginner or a seasoned pro, you're in the right place. My name is Deb and I'm thrilled that you are joining me on this creative journey. In each episode, we'll dive into the world of bag making, exploring a range of topics that will fuel your imagination and ignite your sewing prowess. From discussing the latest bag patterns that have the crafting community buzzing, to exploring various techniques that can add the perfect touch to your designs and everything in between. We will hopefully be joined by some incredible guests, bag makers, designers and small business owners who will share their experiences, insights and invaluable tips to help you level up your bag making game. So whether you're stitching up your first tote bag or perfecting your crossbody skills, this podcast is your source for inspiration, education and a good dose of bag making camaraderie. I can't wait to share this adventure with you, so make sure to subscribe to the podcast and tune in to our upcoming episodes. So let's not delay any further and get started with this week's episode. Hi, welcome back to the Bag Makers Society podcast. First of all, let me apologise for how long it's been since the last episode. I think it's been probably over 3 weeks. I've had quite a few technical issues, shall we say, with computers and such like, which hopefully are now sorted. So this is the first time that I am recording the podcast on my new laptop and with a new microphone. So we are still becoming acquainted. So that was the first thing that I did want to say was, as I say, first of all, apologies. I didn't actually want to put something out there that wasn't of the standard that I'd want it to be. And unfortunately, the other software just wasn't working anymore. So we had to do a little upgrade. But that is all done. And moving forward, it should be a lot easier now to get the podcasts out. So I thought I'd focus this week's podcast on a question that I get asked all of the time, which is, do you need a special sewing machine or an industrial sewing machine to sew bags? And in short, the answer is no, but it does kind of depend on the type of bags that you want to sew. So I've been doing sort of a little bit of research into different types of sewing machines because as you'll know, if a lot of you follow me on social media or on YouTube, I work off a Janome HD9, which is obviously quite a powerful straight stitch machine, and then I also have a Jack H2 walking foot machine, which is obviously an industrial machine, but I have used other sewing machines as well. So I did, I just sort of did a little bit of research on some of the different sewing machines and sewing machines that people found useful, and by looking through some of the sewing machine things, the geek in me actually came across sort of like the history of the sewing machine as well, which I thought was really sort of like interesting, how how it was developed over the years and how different people have taken it forward. And I think a lot of people think back of the history of sewing machines and they just automatically go to Singer and think that Singer were the first people to or was the first person to invent the sewing machine, which isn't actually the case. Actually, the sewing machine goes back to around about 1755. I think it's a German inventor who was actually working in England, who kind of started off the trajectory of looking at the sewing machine. And obviously you've got the different types of sewing machine, which the chain stitch and the lock stitch. So it's gone through various different variations, if you like, of the type of things. But it was really sort of like interesting to sort of read sort of like how it's developed, and what it was used for, because obviously the main thing of the sewing machine was probably industry to start with, because making things especially in leather for sort of like saddles and bridle work and stuff like that, sewing by hand would be laborious and quite difficult, and obviously having a machine to do that would would speed up production, would make things, more uniform looking and all of that sort of thing. So it's actually gone through quite a few variations over the years, and the Wikipedia page for the history of the sewing machine is actually quite interesting. I was delving into that one late night when I couldn't sleep very much, and it is a really interesting read. And I actually always thought that the first person to sort of patent what we would class as the domestic home sewing machine was Eliza Howe. That's kind of, when I've looked at things, that's always kind of what I've thought, but actually it was him that got the first patent. So it was actually somebody completely different. It was actually, I think, somebody called John Fisher, who did it slightly earlier, about 9 months earlier than he did. He just didn't file his paperwork properly, so he lost the patent and it went to somebody else, and that is how they get the recognition for inventing what we class as the domestic lock stitch machine, which was around about the mid 1800s. So sort of really interesting. So how it went through all of those processes, and obviously still continues to do so to this day. There's always new machines coming out with new little gadgets and new things on them to make life easier for us sewers. So I just thought I'd drop that in if anybody wants to go and have a look at the Wikipedia page on the history of the sewing machine. It is a very interesting read. So back to whether you need a specific type of sewing machine to sew bags, and like I say, the bottom line is no, you don't. You need a good quality machine. Very basic sort of plastic part machines aren't going to cut it with bag making. So you do need sort of like a good entry level sewing machine, but you don't need to be going out and spending thousands on a sewing machine, or even hundreds and hundreds and hundreds to buy a sewing machine to sew bags on. The first bag I actually ever sewed was on an IKEA sewing machine that I bought for £45, and I've talked about this in a previous podcast, and I think I actually shared a picture on social media because I still have that sewing machine. And yes, it was difficult, mainly because I didn't have the foggiest clue what I was doing. So I didn't keep interfacings out of the seam allowances, and I didn't trim my seam allowances back and all of that sort of thing. So I did make life so much more difficult for myself. But I did it. As I sewed a purse on a £45 machine from IKEA, and it handled it perfectly well. I mean, I suppose that's Swedish engineering for you. But it did work. And then I went on to vintage sewing machines. So I had a couple of vintage Singers, and when people are getting into bag making, and particularly if they maybe don't have a sewing machine already, that is probably the place that I'd tell people to start, especially if they're only going to be sewing bags or maybe doing quilting, and they don't need all of the fancy decorative stitches for other things, and they will be okay with just a straight stitch, is to go for like a good quality second-hand vintage sewing machine. Maybe seeing if you can get one through somebody local who services sewing machines, so that it's being serviced and is working well. But they're usually really powerful machines. They're usually all metal engineering inside. The best vintage sewing machine to go for is without doubt the 201K. It is the Rolls Royce of sewing machines, which is the Singer 201K. It does sew through lots of layers with the right needle and the right tension set up. It will sew through leather. So if you're looking to get into bag making and you haven't got a sewing machine, or you do have a sewing machine and it isn't going to sew the type of things that you want to sew, do have a look at some of the vintage sewing machines, because you usually can pick them up very, very reasonably, and they're a very good place to start. I have, even though you see I work off a Janome HD9 and a Jack H2, I still have my vintage sewing machines, and they still do get brought out to get used every now and then. But the modern machines as well, you do get machines that will handle making bags. You just have to be quite sort of mindful of maybe the materials that you're using to make the bag. So if you're using very heavy upholstery type fabrics, if you're using quite thick vinyl, quite thick leather even, you are going to need quite a punchy machine, no doubt about it. You probably are going to need something like the Janome HD9, or there's like a Juki equivalent. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head at the moment. But Juki do a very similar sort of like domestic type machine, but it's what they class as like semi-industrial. So it's a straight stitch, but it's heavy duty. It will sew through quite a lot of layers. But if you're wanting to sew vinyl type bags, then if you choose a vinyl that is a little bit thinner, isn't too thick to sew, if you're choosing fabrics that aren't too thick, so staying away from the really thick, heavy industrial upholstery type fabrics, you know, maybe stick with sort of nothing any thicker than like canvas. When you're interfacing, keep your interfacing out of your seam allowances. If your machine does struggle, that will make a massive difference. If your machine struggles to top stitch, maybe looking at cutting your seam allowances back, or grading your seam allowances is a really good thing to do. I sometimes find when, especially in the top part of a bag where you go to top stitch, if you cut your seam allowances, all of your seam allowances back quite a bit, and then when you go to top stitch, you get kind of like a tube effect. It's the only way that I can kind of describe it. So because that you kind of encase that cut back seam, and then it doesn't always look flat and as nice as what you'd want it to. So instead of cutting all of your seams back, you only cut back a few of your seams, and you grade your seams back, so you thin your seams out. If you're unsure what I mean, if you Google grading seam allowances, it will sort of bring up some blog posts, and I'll maybe try and do a blog post in the future about what I mean. But it'll basically mean like leaving one of your seam allowances full. So say if you've got like four layers, you'd cut each layer back slightly more than the last layer, so that it's kind of like a stepped effect. So it reduces the bulk, but it doesn't give you that sort of that rolled sort of effect on the very top. I hope I'm kind of getting across what I mean. So there is little tips and tricks to be using to make things easier for your machine to sew through things. Using the right needle is a massive one. The amount of times when people sort of say, oh, I'm struggling to just top stitch, and I'll say, what needle have you got in? They're like, oh, I don't know, just the needle that came with the machine. So which is usually an 80-12 is usually a standard needle that comes with machines. So if you're struggling and you're getting skip stitches, or your machine's struggling to punch through the fabric, try a bigger needle. Microtex needles are really, really good as well. They help to kind of like push through the fabric really well. But skip stitches especially, go up a size with your needle. So if you're using say a 90-14, go up to 100/16, and that should help. Using the right needle does make a difference. A lot of people, especially when they're using vinyl, they'll think that they need to use a leather needle, because vinyl and leather are very similar, but you don't, because what will happen with the leather needle is the leather needle actually slashes the fabric to punch through. It's like a little small knife, and you don't want to be using that with any woven fabrics, and vinyls and faux leathers are all woven man-made fabrics. So literally only use a leather needle when you're sewing with leather, and then the rest of the time either use like a universal standard point or a microtex needle in the size that you want. So again, when you're sewing bags, if you're struggling with thick seams, things like hump jumpers can help you get over thicker seams and give your sewing machine a little bit of a helping hand. Making sure that your tension and your foot pressure is set up right for what you're sewing. And there's loads of helpful videos on YouTube, so if you're struggling and you think I need to change that, if you look on YouTube, there's loads of videos showing you how to change your foot pressure or your tension to make things a little bit easier. So definitely when you're starting off bag making, you don't need to go out and spend an absolute fortune on a sewing machine. Use a sewing machine that you've got first of all, and make things that your sewing machine can handle, so that you know whether you actually enjoy bag making. And if you do enjoy it and you want to progress into other things that you know ultimately your sewing machine isn't going to handle, then you can always upgrade later on. And because you'll know what you want to sew or what you like sewing, you'll know what you're looking for. And I'd always suggest, if you are going to go and buy a sewing machine and spend quite a lot of money on it, go and test them out in a shop if you can. If you need to visit a few shops to test out a few different ones, then definitely do that, because they're big investments, and you want to make sure that you're getting the right one and that it lasts you for quite a while. I mean, I love my Janome HD9. She can be a temperamental little mare sometimes, but I do love her, and I love my Jack. It literally sews through anything I throw at it. But like I say, I love my industrial sewing machines as well. I've worked on Boninas, which I've found to be really good machines for bag making. They do seem to have that sort of sturdiness about them, that they're able to handle lots of fabric, and they seem to be very well built. And as well, if you do belong to any sort of sewing groups or like craft meetups, if other people have a sewing machine that you're interested in, ask them if you can have a little go of it when you're at one of the sewing meetups. See how you feel with it, see if you like it. It's a really good way to test out different sewing machines, so that you can make a decision on your investment before actually going out and parting with your money. So I would hate anybody to sort of look at bag making and think, oh well, I need to go out and buy this all powerful super duper sewing machine, and then it actually turns out that they don't need it, because the type of things that they like to make, or the type of materials that they like to work with, they don't actually need it for. So definitely loads and loads of research, loads of testing if you can, either in shops or with friends and sewing acquaintances, sewing buddies. Ask in sewing groups, ask what people are sewing their bags on. Everybody's usually very, very helpful in all of the Facebook groups, and they'll tell you what they're sewing on, and they'll tell you if their machine has quirks that they don't like, or things that their machine does that they do like. If it has certain, it might have a thread cutter, or it might have a automatic needle threader, different little things like that they find really useful, they'll be able to tell you about. So I hope this episode's been a little bit helpful, especially if you're new to bag making, or you're just thinking about getting into bag making and you've been a little bit put off because you think that you need to go out and buy a really expensive, flashy, powerful sewing machine, because everybody who you watch on YouTube has these big industrial sewing machines, and you don't have one, and you think that you're not going to be able to make lovely bags on a normal sewing machine. You absolutely can, 100% you can. And if you're struggling with anything, or you need a little bit of help and advice, obviously I have the Facebook group, which is the UK Bag Maker Society. Feel free to come and ask any questions in there. As always, you can reach out to me on social media, so my page is Me Made Makes. You can send me a message through there if you want to ask me any questions, or drop me a message through the website, which is www.memadmakes.co.uk, and I'll happily help answer any questions that you might have about bag making sewing machines, or if I don't know the answer, I'll help you find it out. So I hope this episode's been interesting to you. If you've got any suggestions for future episodes, if there's topics that you'd like me to cover, feel free to, again, drop me a message, give me suggestions. I'd love to hear them. And thank you for listening. Enjoy your week. See you soon. Bye.